Welcome everyone. We're starting now, 6:33. My name is Rosie. Thank you for joining Design Lab's Anti-Racism Studio Session Series. First, we'd like to acknowledge the native lands of the Kumeyaay tribe, which UC San Diego is built on. This talk is the third now out of 14 studio sessions in the Power, Privilege, and Ethical Responses Anti-Racism series, where we address the question, how might we design from whiteness to oneness? Through these sessions, we encourage actively looking through our personal and our collective lens to take a deep dive at how we arrived at whiteness through all the structures and how it's essential to move away from this in order to design that is for all, designing from whiteness to oneness in humanity. We hope to share tools that address the experiences of the Black community in hopes of bridging existing gaps between the historical precedent and current calls to action, and hope to provide you with the dialogue and tools to enhance thinking, communication, and self-reflection. We hope to address and work through these issues in real time through engagement that enhances empathy and ethical responsibility. The goal is to increase awareness on social justice issues and stand by the community team's values of ethical design for change. And then to follow up on the education provided, we plan to also incorporate actionable items for change at UCSD and in our local communities in San Diego. To help us improve, we'll be sending a link to the feedback survey up in the chat. Please fill this out. It helps us to learn and kind of tweak our sessions to help serve you better. And then that link is in the chat now. So I'd like to welcome our speaker of the evening, Salina Villegas from Rise San Diego. She's a Hood Scholar raised in City Heights neighborhood of San Diego. For the last 10 years, she's advocated for BIPOC communities serving nonprofit, corporate, and educational sectors in their efforts to provide professional development, educational equity, and culture change initiatives. We're more than happy to have her here tonight.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm very, very, very happy to be here. I know that some of you all have been, you've been tuning in every Tuesday and every Thursday with some of the topics. I personally went to the one on Thursday and was just, I took a lot of nuggets with me. So I hope to do the same here this evening. So we're going to talk about what's wrong with individualism. And if you heard me speak just a second ago, I said we are going to talk about what's wrong with individualism, because even now in the present moment, I'm trying to practice that it's something that we are going to do, even if it's something that I am presenting. It's definitely something that I want us to be involved in as a collective. So before I get into all of that, I do have a video that I'd like to share with you all.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Just 'cause I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like suns and like moons, with the certainty of times, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eye? Shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soul's rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just as I laugh, as if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words, you can cut me with your lies, you can kill me with your hatefulness, but just like life, I'll rise. Does my sexiness offend you? Oh. Does it come as a surprise that I dance as if I have diamonds at the meeting of my thighs?
Not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you.
Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear.
Is the video playing and I'm just not getting it, or is it?
Into a daybreak miraculously clear, I ride, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave.
What immediate results do you hope to achieve?
And so,
We hope to achieve
naturally,
equal rights.
I'll rise. I'll rise. I'll rise.
So I wanted to share that video with you all because it speaks volumes, I think, to what the essence of what I'm trying to get to this evening. It's also a video that we share a lot with my work, Rise San Diego. The Still I Rise poetry by Maya Angelou is really, really, it's moving for me. And I thought that hopefully that it was moving for you. And so again, just a quick introduction. My name is Salina Villegas. I'm here because I'm an anti-racist and I believe in collective social responsibility. I have my contact information here if folks wish to reach out to me afterwards with any questions or
turn away from the violence and xenophobia about
I do hear some feedback in the background on somebody's, so make sure that maybe we're on mute. All right, cool. All right, thank you. So first, let's share a little quote. So shouting self-care at people who actually need community care is how we fail people. And I wanted to share that too, because I think it speaks a lot to this idea of individualism and the way that I have experienced individualism and also have learned about individualism is that it's kind of this hallmark of Eurocentrism. I think that we have underestimated the extent to which individualism is implicated in matters of race. In my experience, and I know in a lot of other folks' experiences, folks that feed into this Eurocentrism, this whiteness, we see racism, or white folks tend to see racism the way that they see the world, through an individualistic lens. So like, for example, like only, good white folks see racist attitudes and behaviors coming from the bad white folks. And so there's this kind of this separation between like, this is not me, it has nothing to do with me, and this is them, and I am outside of them. Or also speaking to this idea of if we have a Black student in a classroom and we're talking about, the instructor is talking about racism or talking about slavery, we likely look at that one individual as if they are speaking on behalf of an entire community. So we often, we tokenize Black and brown folks, as if they're experts and folks of their community. So a little bit more into this image. This is kind of how I think that we see the world as it is now. I mean, previous to what we are experiencing now in the pandemic, this is kind of, we were kind of like, in our own little silos. And I think that what I want to mention this evening is that there's kind of a dark side to individualism. Here in the United States of America, we glorify this idea of the American dream, or somebody like we see in social media outlets praising themselves for either like a degree that they just got, or having graduated, or having just getting married, or having a child, as if it's something that like only one person or individual was responsible for. And I think in terms of race, what I want us to realize is that individualism conveniently disconnects us from our own communities and other communities. So there are centuries of anti-Blackness that have shown that Black people alone are not able to solve their problems or solve this problem. And yet we feel, and yet a lot of folks feel outside of this issue of racism, like there's little to no responsibility for the white or representations of whiteness. And so this individualism, or this idea of individualism, prevents us from large scale progress against racism. Another thing is that individualism, it tends to disconnect us from our history. It disconnects us from legacy. So how many times have we heard folks argue against this idea of reparations because they themselves have not enslaved somebody? So by saying that, I don't think to this day that Black folks should get land or money or any kind of reparations because I personally did not own a slave, or maybe even your mother or your father did not own a slave, or maybe even you can go as far as your grandfather for some folks. But even then, it doesn't rid this legacy that somewhere down the line, somebody had benefited from directly or indirectly from the racism and enslavement of Black folks. And so again, we see that this individualism is a convenient way to absolve ourselves and others of taking responsibility. It stops us from seeing not only how we benefit as a collective from the sins of our past, but also how we are continuing to act out in the same oppressive ways. So if I fail to see the parallels, if we fail to see the parallels between a white woman who's calling the security or police on somebody that they think is threatening, if we fail to see that parallel to a white mistress calling her overseer so that they can punish an enslaved folk, then we can't really appreciate the full weight of this violence of individualism. And so it seems that we have a couple of choices. And so the first choice is we ignore our role in the collective and we just allow this violence and forms of oppression to continue. Or we can accept responsibility for ourselves and for others and then start disrupting this legacy. And maybe even work with each other and on ourselves to create a new legacy. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about mental health. So moving beyond this idea of self-care and understanding that community care is just as important as self-care. And so I see a lot, especially now in the pandemic, that folks are kind of being upfront about needing to take care of ourselves as individuals, making sure you're going to therapy, or making sure that you're going out and you're getting your run in, or you're going out and you're eating healthy, making sure that we are taking care of ourselves in this moment so that we can be healthy. And I don't want to disregard that is important. Taking care of ourselves is important. But we also have to understand that some folks cannot just escape the systematic happenings outside of also making sure that they're eating healthy, going for a run, and going to therapy. As we see over the last couple months with a lot of the marches and a lot of the protests, that are happening, that these systematic things are still happening, whether we're taking care of ourselves or not. And so, and as a result of that, people don't always know how to support each other during these hard times, because we're told to deal with our problems on our own. And again, I want to say that we should deal with our problems on our own. Some of that journey needs to be with our individual selves, but also I think ultimately the power and the initiative that we take to care for ourselves is our responsibility, but that doesn't negate the power of what it's like to care for or on a group of folks, a community, a collective. And so racism is not, again, I want to remind us that racism is not primarily the result of one individual person. Even if, you know, I think about this sometimes in my wildest dreams. If I could go back into history, I would probably slay Christopher Columbus, right? Like that's my goal, is like, that's who I would probably kill. But I have to remember, and I think that we all have to remember, that there's not just one person that was a part of this. The same way that I think some folks feel like if we just got rid of the president, everything will be fine. If we just got rid of this one person, everything would be fine. But again, there's this danger in individualism, as if it's only one person that's a part of that. But so it's not just an individual personal failure, it's a collective inheritance of all of us who are a part of the system, indirectly or directly. And so let's get into a little bit about what is community care. And so the way that I think that community care, it means that people are committed to leveraging their privilege to be there for one another in various ways. And I put various ways because this can be small scale for some folks and it could be large scale. It really does just depend on, you know, what you have the capacity to do. And in many ways, if you look over my definition of community care, it sounds very similar to what somebody might think of like an ally or allyship. And so practicing community care, in addition to self-care, asks us to try to go a step further. It asks us to take the initiative, to give and to show empathy and compassion for each other, even if somebody isn't doing that for themselves. And I think the other thing I want to just quickly share is that I think that we have this assumption that there is a certain way that we have to take care of ourselves, and everybody just knows what that is. And I don't think that that's quite accurate. So I think that we have just kind of fallen into this idea that if I mentioned it earlier, if you just go to therapy, everything will be fine. And I think that, or if you just practice yoga, if you just do this mindfulness activity, everything will be fine. And one of the things that I learned in my practice of doing some mindfulness activity with youth is that not everybody feels comfortable or safe when they're closing their eyes. So if you want to do this like mindfulness activity or like a body scan, you know, and you're asking a group of youth, particularly Black or brown youth, like, let's close our eyes for a moment. We're assuming that the community is trusting us. We're assuming that these young folks, have not gone through a sense of trauma with their eyes closed. And so one of the ways that I think that I can leverage my privilege, at least in working with students, is to just acknowledge up front that not everybody finds mindfulness activities like that as safe, and not everybody finds mindfulness activities like that as helpful. Even if somebody can get past the point of closing their eyes and listening to a body scan, generational trauma is a thing. And so maybe you can close your eyes, but maybe it's hard for you to hear and see the things that are happening in your mind when your eyes are closed. And so again, I think that we just we want to play with this idea and be open and be curious to this idea that there's one way that we take care of ourselves, and acknowledging that if we're really trying to get outside of this individualism and into a community care, that safety and comfort and healing looks different for everybody. And so I wanted to share a little bit with you about what adaptive leadership is. It's something that we utilize a lot at RISE San Diego. And so we deal a lot with, at RISE, we deal a lot with having to build urban, or having to recognize that leaders exist in our own communities. They're not just outside of the community. We don't need somebody from Harvard, or we don't need somebody from Utah to come into Southeast San Diego to save us. We have folks in Southeast San Diego that have been saving us and that we can kind of elevate. And so this idea of adaptive leadership. So typically when we think about leadership, this is how we think of it. We think that there is that one or a couple people in charge, and then there's some people who work for those people who kind of are the middlemen or middle women, and then there's kind of like the team of people that are doing the groundwork. And so this traditional model of leadership is this top down, as if like there's an authority figure and everybody else is kind of underneath them. And if we take the top of the triangle off, if the leader leaves, or if the leader gets replaced or dies or whatever, there's kind of this panic that happens between the middle and at the bottom. It's as if the group falls apart because this leader is not there. And so this is kind of the way that we practice leadership here in the United States, and it's coming from that individualism thought that I am a leader, so I have to operate in this way, or I am working for the leader, and so I have to operate in this way. And so I wanted to play, a little bit of, play a little bit with this idea of management and leadership versus authority. Most of us use leadership and authority interchangeably. But they're very, very, very different. So leadership is supposed to provide their constituents with a sense of direction and protection and answers and so on and so forth. But authority, it's very different if a leader walks into the room and then an authority walks into the room. So, and you can kind of tell because leaders differ from authorities in the way that they introduce or deal with disorientation, the way that they handle conflict, and the way that they raise questions and challenge norms. And so what I want to do is have a quick breakout session. I know that we in previous sessions we've saved a lot of the activities for the end, but I want folks to kind of split up now. And this is what I want you to do is I see some of you have a pen and a paper, and even if you don't, you can still do this activity. So I want you to think about an issue happening in your community. And you can define community however you want. It could be the neighbors on your block. It could be your church. It could be, the city of San Diego. It can be here on earth, however you want to define that. So I want you to think about an issue happening in your community. I want you to write down and/or think about how would you solve this issue if you were quote unquote in charge. If you were the authority figure, if you were the leader, mayor, president, whatever it is, how would you solve this issue? And then I want you to think a step further of, do the solutions solve the issue? Did what you come up with as your solution actually solve the issue? And then taking it a step further, what are the root causes of this issue? So you kind of got 4 things happening here. Think about an issue. How would you solve it? Do the solutions solve the issue? And what are the root causes of the issue? And so we're gonna do a breakout room. We're gonna spend about maybe about 6 minutes if not 7, to make sure that folks are sharing out with their respective groups. All right, is everybody ready? Okay, here we go. All right, so we have, it looks like everybody is back from the breakout room. I do understand that that was entirely way too fast. It is something that we're going to table also at the end, so making sure that you hold on to that issue, whatever that issue is. It's also going to be helpful moving forward. And so the reason why that I bring up this this activity and or this challenge is because I think that all of us can very quickly come up with an issue and then moving forward say, you know, if it were me, or this is what I think that they should do, where we seem to always, you know, have the solution readily available. And I think that the last question is probably the hardest one, is what are the root causes of this issue? And most of the time, the solutions that we are able to come up with off the fly are not getting to the root of the issue. And so that's just speaks into a little bit more of the adaptive leadership model. So in adaptive leadership, it's a process where it's this idea of shared responsibility for future success. And some of the key features are shared responsibility, addressing elephants in the room, being able to have independent judgment, but also being in a space of continuous learning, and then having the capacity for leadership. And again, I want to make sure that we understand the difference between leadership and authority. So notice here it doesn't say authority, the capacity to have an authority, but the capacity to lead. And so this idea of shared power amongst everyone, it really just puts a focus on not just those that are quote unquote in charge, but it puts a focus on everyone involved. And so when I asked you all to think about a solution for your community as if you were in charge, I wonder, and I'm curious if those solutions included asking the community themselves what their needs were before we decided as leaders what their needs were. And so that's kind of what I wanna play with today. So there are types of leadership challenges when we talk about adaptive leadership. So there's technical challenges and there's adaptive challenges. So technical challenges are easy to identify. The solutions come quick and easy, kind of what we did now. It requires small changes with some known boundaries. It can usually be solved by an expert or an authority figure, and solutions can be implemented very quickly. This is something that we see a lot when, let's say that we elect an elected official and we try to hold these elected officials accountable. Oftentimes, there might be groups of folks going to a city council meeting and talking about crime that's happening, let's say like in the City Heights neighborhood. And then the solution might be for these elected officials might be a technical solution. And that technical solution would be, well, maybe if we put up more streetlights, all crime will be gone. And we've kind of seen technical solutions like that been implemented in the communities as if it's going to get to the root cause of the issue. So what we see happening is folks are coming up with technical solutions to adaptive issues. And the only way to get to an adaptive issue is to come up with an adaptive solution. So adaptive solutions are very difficult to identify and very easy to deny. It requires change in values, mindset, your beliefs, and the way that you approach work. It requires a lot of changes across many, sometimes unknown boundaries. And it's generally solved by the people with the problem, which is kind of, why I addressed it earlier. Well, I wonder when we were coming up with solutions for the community, if we had even thought to ask the community or involve them in any way, shape, or form outside of just a survey. And again, no quick fixes. It requires constant experimentation. And something that I notice now that I'm aware of kind of the difference between technical solutions and adaptive solutions are that we often see these things played out either in our own lives or either like on, I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. So anytime that I'm watching a movie on Pixar or with DreamWorks, I'm noticing that there's always a character who is trying to mess things up. And it's generally the one that wants to have an adaptive, trying to get to the adaptive challenge or adaptive solution. And usually it's the community or a group of experts that are saying, no, that's not gonna work. It's gonna take too much time. It's gonna take too much money. It's gonna take too much energy, you know, all of those things. So I want us to think a little bit more about the times where either we have been the adaptive leader in a situation or we have shut down an adaptive leader in a situation. And so here are some kind of the 4 basic characteristics that make up adaptive leaders. And one of them is emotional intelligence. And that's the one that I'm going to be focusing on moving forward when it comes to this idea of practicing shared responsibility and moving out of this individualistic way of thought. And so as some of you may or may not know, but EQ, emotional intelligence, is just the ability to recognize our own emotions and those of other people. And so when you have this awareness as a leader, you're able to build trust with the people in your community and also foster really intriguing and quality relationships. And so emotional intelligence. So again, it just means a clear recognition of your overall personality. And sometimes some of us take some tests that tell us a little bit about our personality. Some, you know, I've taken Myers-Briggs, I've taken StrengthsFinder, but generally the way that we think that we become aware of ourselves and our emotions is by looking through what some of those strengths and those weaknesses are, is kind of going over what our thoughts and our beliefs are, whether or not you know, are really into reading your birth chart or your horoscope, you know, based off of my sign. I'm an air sign, so I'm a lot more heady, you know, so just looking into those things that are a part of me and my thoughts and my beliefs, emotions, and then kind of what our sources of motivation are. And so I want to do another fun activity. So I do need everybody to get out a piece of paper and a drawing utensil, a crayon or a pen or a pencil. This one I definitely want everybody to participate in, and we'll make sure that everybody has the time. So after you get out this writing utensil and a piece of paper, I want you to draw a pig. It can look like this pig, it could look like your own pig, but I want you to spend about, I'll give you 2 minutes to draw a pig as efficiently as you can. How we doing? Everybody got their pig? Okay, I'll give folks about 30 more seconds to make sure that you're adding the finishing touch to your pig. All right, so the reason why that I wanted us to do this activity is because I don't necessarily have the capacity and or the time to review everybody's strengths finders or your birth chart or your Myers-Briggs or whatnot. So I thought that this would be a fun way to kind of introduce some parts of you that maybe you were or were not aware of in terms of how you drew your pig. And so if your pig is drawn on the top of the page, you tend to be more optimistic. If the pig is drawn in the middle of your page, you tend to be very realistic. And there's some other kind of fun things here. So if you drew your pig at the bottom of the page, you might have a hard time seeing the silver linings in the clouds. If your pig is facing left, you tend to be friendly and traditional. If your pig is facing right, this person tends to be innovative and action-oriented. If your pig is facing straight ahead, this person is direct and is oftentimes the devil's advocate. Now, if your pig had a lot of detail, it says that you are analytical and very cautious. If your pig had little detail, you tend to be maybe emotional and a bit of a risk taker. If your pig has 4 feet, you are secure and you're stubborn. And if your pig has less than 4 feet, it's said that you might be having a hard time right now. If your pig ear size corresponds, their pig's ear size is supposed to correspond with your listening skills. So if the ears are small, you might not be a good listener. But if your pig's ears are huge, then you might be a really good listener. And last but not least, if the tail length corresponds with your luck in dating and relationships. So if your tail is really long, it says that you tend to have a lot more luck in that area. And so I wanted to hear maybe a little bit from one or 2 people about how accurate this was, how inaccurate it was, how it feels for somebody to tell you about yourself based off of some little thing that you just drew. So 1 or 2 voices, if I could. And I guess if you want to speak, make sure that you're off of mute because I don't hear anybody speaking. We have any speakers?
I see Lily has her hand raised.
Okay.
All right, thanks. You just made me feel really bad for all the comments I make about asking my friends their signs. But I guess like maybe part of the thing is like no set of symbols is gonna tell you what your personality is, but these kinds of devices or ways of get us to like provoke us to be more thoughtful about different aspects of our personality. So if it's a spark to dialogue, then it can be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I mean, I'm always asking people like, what is your moon? What is your rising? Like I'm, analyzing things as if I know everything about you based off of what you say. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Virgo, Pisces, Scorpio. And I'm out.
Okay. So and I really appreciate the voice that was able to speak out. But what I really wanted that to kind of be an activity for is this idea of we often assume what somebody's world is like based off of very little detail that we get. And so when we truly practice empathy, it's about seeing their world, seeing somebody else's world, the community, the collective, as they experience it, not as we experience it. Empathy allows us to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. And it's very important to be able to know how to do that when we're leading a team at work, when we're raising our children, when we're in relationship with someone, or when we're just out there at a grocery store in the middle of a pandemic, hoping that somebody's wearing a mask. And so this idea of, acting responsibly on behalf of the community, leaders who actively have empathy, they tend to support the growth of their team, but also the growth of themselves. And they are really skilled at being able to offer and be curious and be open about what somebody's shortcomings might be, as opposed to an authority figure who might be really quick to offer a lot of criticism and kind of give unsolicited feedback or even unsolicited advice. And so again, some quick traits about adaptive leaders. When we are leading with, when we have adaptive leadership, we have the capacity to create an environment that embraces a diversity of views and takes advantage of the collective knowledge to benefit the organization, but also to benefit. And I want to say that when I use the word organization, I'm using it on behalf of this idea of organizing. And so, and by no way do I mean like organization as it only relates to the corporate world or the work world. But organizing can happen, if we're planning a party, if we're planning Thanksgiving, and or any other kind of holiday that you might celebrate with your family. It's not fun when it's just one person in charge and they decide the menu and they decide what everybody's going to wear. It's kind of, you want to make sure that you're acting on behalf of the collective and of the community. And that's kind of what adaptive leadership is all about. And then somebody who can understand that change is a painful process. I spoke to earlier about this idea of technical solutions and adaptive solutions. So we see a lot of technical solutions being played out in the community, but also within our friendships, within our relationships, within the way that even we treat ourselves. We, whatever the issue is, we are very quick to go on the internet and maybe find a solution, or ask our friends and they give us a solution, or maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's smoking, maybe it's playing a video game, whatever it is. We tend to just kind of get our quick fix when we need it, as opposed to going through this painful process of maybe getting to the root issue of what is actually going on and then addressing that as it is. And then admitting that we make mistakes along the way. And not shaming folks for that, but instead creating an environment where mistakes are okay. And being open to experimentation. And that means that we have to take a lot of risks, So when it comes to wanting to undo racism, wanting to make sure that we are implementing self-care and community care, these are some of the things that I think would be helpful for us. And so last, but also not least, we hear a lot of this statement of it takes a village to raise a child. And I have been doing a lot of research around like who said that, when did they say it, and where did that come from? Now, when I looked it up on the internet said, oh yeah, Hillary Clinton said that. And I said, that cannot be right. I know that I heard somebody say that before Hillary Clinton was like even a thing. And so I had to dig a lot. And again, I was coming up with more or less a technical solution. I just wanted to know who said the quote so I can put it on the slide, right? And so I was thinking, wait, like the hard route would be to try to find out where does this actually come from? It wasn't Hillary Clinton. And even when I took a step further, it said some African tribe. I'm like, okay, as if like we can just represent all of Africa in one statement. And so I finally found that it came from a village in Tanzania. And the original statement is that what this translates to is that regardless of a child's biological parents, its upbringing belongs to the community. And so this is kind of supposed to be the direct translation to it takes a village to raise a child. And I think that whenever we feel like we might be alone, or we feel like we're being singled out, we have to acknowledge that there is a collective and a community responsibility along with that. So yes, I might not have directly owned a slave, but I can acknowledge that I'm a Latina and I'm light-skinned Latina, and there are certain privileges that whiteness affords me that somebody like my sister would not be afforded, who's about 5 shades darker than I am. So just wanted to offer that for us to remember. And that's about it. Thank you for sitting through that. And again, this is my email if folks want to reach out to me and contact me after this. I know that we have some other activities waiting for us.